Well, this is going to be another My Hero Academia discussion video. The dog is here. We'll see how long that lasts. This video is actually going to be about the different heroes that have died throughout the course of My Hero Academia. The different named heroes that have died. I'm just gonna go through them in order. We know that a whole bunch of them just died with what happened with the, the paranormal liberation, war arc that just happened, and that cost, we lost a lot of good heroes in that fight. Several good ones. Unfortunately, none of the students died, but, we lost a teacher and we lost one of the top 10 heroes, so that's not a good thing. Plus everything else that happened with that, with everything that was revealed about Endeavor and Hawks and Dobby and One for All and all that stuff. But this video is going to be about the different heroes, as I said, that have died throughout the course of My Hero Academia. I'm kind of just going to go through them in order, or at least the rough order that we probably know that they died in. Because there's a couple of them where we don't have like exact dates of when they died, but we can kind of assume that this is the order that they died in. I will go over the character from My Hero Vigilantes that has passed, that we know is dead, but is kind of not dead. I'll go through that. That's one of the ones. I'm not going to be going into super amount of detail about the characters, just a little bit about, what they were in the series, how they died, and kind of what impact that has had on the series so far. The more major ones, of course, are going to be Midnight and Sir Night-Eye, and that type of stuff. But we're going to see some of the other smaller ones that are still heroes that have died throughout the course of the series. So we're going to start with the different users of One for All. We know that the younger brother, One for All's younger brother has died. All for One's younger brother has died. That, given the fact that that was, almost 100 years ago, the quirk, being passed on to him, he probably wouldn't have died with it being in his system, but with the amount of, what else we know about the quirk now, even, he didn't have any, longevity quirks that made him die. We don't know anything else about that. Number two and number three, number two and number three are probably both definitely dead by this point in time. We don't know anything about them. We don't even know their names. We don't know what their quirks were yet. Izuku might know now that he's, out of the coma and he's gone off to be a rogue hero somewhere. But beyond that, we don't really know too much about them. We know a little bit about Hikage Shinomori, who was the one that, with the lines by his eye, that was the one that went off and trained in the forest for like 18, 19 years after he got the quirk to build up the power more for the next generation to use it. We know that his quirk was Danger Sense. We know that he died of old age. We don't know exactly anything else about that. We know that he found Daigoro Banjo at some point, or Daigoro Banjo found him. And, he gave, and then, Hikage passed the power on to Daigoro, but we don't know too much else about that beyond the fact of via the effects of, All for One, or via the effects of One for All, that he died because of old age is what it appeared to be from what All Might found out. We don't know how the second incarnate had it, or the third. We don't know how they died. We're assuming that they were probably killed by One for All. I keep mixing those up. Everybody does that. We're assuming that they got killed by, All for One at some point. And the brother probably was killed. Really? I'm trying to do a video on a serious matter here. You scratching does not help. Don't give me that bewildered look. We'll see how much more he decides to interrupt the very serious matter we are discussing right now. Okay, back to the video. We assume that those three were all killed by One for All or were all killed by All for One at some point in time. After they were able to pass down the power, Hikage died of old age. Daigoro Banjo We don't 100% know what happened. We're assuming, again, killed by All for One. His quirk, of course, was Black Whip, which Izuku now has and has become very proficient with. We know that his hero name, I think, was Lariat. Um, I don't know what that. I don't 100% know if that's a reference to anything, but that's what his quirk was, or that's what his hero name was. We know that at some point he met N, who I called Shin in the last video. Sorry, we know that he met N. We don't know what N's quirk was. Again, we assume he was killed by All for One at some point. Like, the 5 other people that have had the quirk, that they were all killed by him at some point. And then, we know at some point he gave the quirk to Nana. We know how Nana died. She died when she fought All for One. In the big battle when Toshinori was, 16, 17 range, and she had already passed on the quirk to him, but she still had enough of it that she was able to fight All for One. Probably gave him a pretty good fight. I'm pretty sure that if Izuku, All Might, and Nana all fought One for All all fought All for One at the same time, with All Might in perfect health and everything, with all of them in perfect health, with the full training and everything involved with the quirk, All for One would be a splat on the pavement right now, and a lot of this problem wouldn't be happening. But that's not the way that the series works, unfortunately. Smudge on the pavement. At least would be causing a lot less damage. But we assume that Nana died during that battle, or as I mentioned in the last video, possibly was badly injured enough that All for One held on to her and possibly tortured her to find out what other information she had. Probably didn't give any of that information up, and then he either killed her that way or she did die in the battle. One of the two. We know that he obviously held on to some parts of her because her hand is now possessed. Shigaraki now has her hand, which is still a very disturbing thought. But we don't really know too much else about that. We know that her quirk was float. That's been stated multiple times now, and Izuku has gotten quite well at controlling it. Beyond that, we don't really know what else is going to happen. All Might's not dead yet. Hopefully he doesn't die for a while. Izuku's not dead, but he definitely took a lot of damage, and now he's off, as I said, being a rogue. But that's what we have for those ones that have definitely, we know that those ones are all dead at this point in time. We just don't know 100% of, exactly how the brother died, number 2, number 3, how they died. Don't know 100% for Daigoro, Banjo, and N, beyond the fact that they were probably killed by All for One. Then we move on to our cameo from, Vigilantes, which I have read. And I like that we get a little bit more of a backstory on some of the characters. Throughout the course of Vigilantes, we have learned about some more of the pasts for, Eraserhead and Present Mike, and for Midnight. And we know that they all had a friend whose name was Oboro Shirakumo, whose hero name was Loud Cloud. He was in class, 2A with, Present Mike. He was in class 1A, 1A of the time. He was in class A at the time, with Present Mike and with Eraserhead, and he was friends with Midnight, and they all interned at the same agency together. His quirk was called Cloud, which just allowed him to generate clouds that he was able to, float around on, fly around on, a lot like Sun Wukong. Oboro's quirk allows him to generate clouds, and then he can fly around on them. The clouds can take a fair amount of weight. At one point in Vigilantes, we see him carrying a bunch of kids on the cloud. And Eraserhead doesn't. Eraserhead, Izawa is still Izawa, but he doesn't seem to have gone as far down the dark and dreary rabbit hole as he has at the point that we know him in the series, because this is, a good 10, in the flashback, it's a flashback in Vigilantes, which Vigilantes itself takes place a couple of years before Izuku starts at UA. He's still in middle school at this point in time when the series starts, probably, maybe just newly into middle school, but that's not a big part of what's going on with this. But Oboro was friends with, Present Mike and Racerhead and Midnight. And what ended up happening was, the four of them all got along rather well. Midnight was a year ahead of them. And, the four of them were a very good group of friends. And, the three, and as you guessed, if you don't read Vigilantes, which you should, Oboro doesn't survive, unfortunately. There was a battle that him and Eraserhead were part of. I don't remember exactly if Izawa and Midnight were part of it, but I'm pretty sure that they were a part of it because it involved their agency when they were doing their interns. It was during their internship time frame. And there had been a big, there had been a building that fell. And the building fell on Oboro. And Izawa was there, and he kind of ended up seeing what happened to Oboro. There is a whole bit that happens with this that if you don't know what I'm talking about, go and read Vigilantes. The Horikoshi does a lot better of explanation for Vigilantes than I can. But he does, but it's a very sad thing that happens. And what ended up, it's a very sad thing that happens for how he dies. And it very much affects Eraserhead. So that's kind of the first death. I mean, we know that Nana's death affected All Might and Gran Torino so much. That's why All Might went off to America and everything after he graduated from UA because, All for One couldn't get him there. He was, out of harm's way for a while while he trained more and more. And, that's how that affected it. But we see kind of more how Oboro's death affected Izawa and Eraserhead and Midnight. And it does affect them a lot because he was their friend and it was the first one of their group to die. He had wanted to be a hero, just, all four of them wanted to be heroes together and everything. But he unfortunately doesn't survive. And, or at the very least, we think he didn't survive. He did die, we know this. But his body was taken by All for One somehow. We're assuming that the doctor that works for All for One that helps create the Nomu had found a way to, acquire the body, and then that body is turned into a Nomu, and that Nomu is Kurogiri, who is kind of the butler / servant / transportation / evil smoke version of Alfred Pennyworth from Batman. Is a weird evil version of him that works for Shigaraki. He takes care of Tomura. And he is currently in custody right now, and they were able to do genetic testing on him, and they found out that his core body is from Oboro. And now Eraserhead and Present Mike were the ones that went in and talked to him. Specifically, Izawa went in and talked to him because him and Izawa were very close. Oboro and Izawa were very, very close. And Izawa tries to get through to him. We can still see how much Oboro's death has affected Izawa, and the fact that we just watched, that the flashback sequence that happened in Vigilantes shows, happened a little while before this is revealed in, the main manga. I kind of hope that they throw in, they threw in a bit of the backstory into the manga, the main series, of course, and in the anime, that's going to be very interesting. I would like them to do a Vigilantes anime. I don't know if they're going to, but I would like them to. But, that's where we get that. And Oboro, I don't know exactly, Kurogiri doesn't seem to be affected by this at all. He doesn't seem to remember at all. All he knows is that he's supposed to take care of Tomura. That's all he knows. That's basically where that death ended. Kind of ended. The story kind of continues with that, and we'll see if at some point maybe, I don't remember if Kurogiri was one of the ones that was able to escape when all of the, Supermax prisons were, emptied by All for One at the end of the last arc, but we'll see what happens with that. Given how loyal he was, I would assume that All for One / Shigaraki would want to get Kurogiri back. He has a very useful ability with his quirk of being able to, open his portals and take you to different places. But let's move on to our next group of people that have passed away, unfortunately, in My Hero Academia. And in this case, we have Water Hose, or Water Horse, because it's written both ways throughout the course of the series. And they are a pro-hero duo that are the parents of Kota Izumi. And they were killed by Muscular. They were out in this little town, and they were the heroes of this town, and Muscular showed up, and he killed them. And Kota was very, very affected, of course, by his parents' death, and now he's staying with I believe it was Mandalay, I think, was the one that is his it's Mandalay that's his I think it's cousin, I think is what she is. But that's where Kota is now, and he's with the Wild Pussycats. And when we first meet Kota, the effect that his parents' death had on him is he does not like heroes. I think he at least likes Mandalay to a degree, possibly the rest of the Wild Pussycats, just because they're kind of there, but he does not like the UA students when they show up, considering the fact that he kicks Deku in the testicles and glares at all of the kids all the time, and is not happy with any of the kids. And then of course Muscular shows back up with the the vanguard squad for the League of Villains, is where they he shows up there. And then Kota has to kind of face his past. He has to face the man that killed his parents. And Izuku is able to defeat Muscular. It takes a lot of freaking damage in the is a lot of damage during that battle. But he's able to defeat Muscular and help Kota kind of start to move on. So it's not that his parents' death hurts any less. It's just that now he understands that your parents didn't choose to leave you. They were taken from you. And yes, they were heroes, and yes, that was part of the reason why they are gone. But that doesn't necessarily mean that being a hero is a bad thing, or that you should try to dissuade other people from being heroes. And we know that Kota writes a letter to Izuku saying thank you for saving him and everything. And we know that leads to helping Izuku's mother, letting him stay at UA when All Might comes to talk to her, which is it kind of snowballs from there. Kota seems to be doing a bit better now, which is good. When we see him when the Wild Pussycats come to visit at UA, he's wearing red shoes that look like Izuku's, I think. So he's doing better. And I think him and Eri may end up hopefully being able to become friends later on, since they're around the same age. But moving on to the next bit. Then we move on to Hero Killer Stain. He's not dead, and he's definitely not a hero anymore. He was kind of a vigilante at one point. We learned that in Vigilantes itself, but during that arc where we deal with him, we find out that he has killed 17 heroes. They are unnamed. We do not know the names of these heroes. We just know that he's been killing them throughout the course of so many months or so, possibly a couple of years. And then he has injured beyond recovery 21 other heroes. One of them was, of course, Ingenium, who is Ida's older brother. Thankfully, Ingenium is not on the list of the dead, but he was on the list of the ones that Stain has injured extremely beyond repair, considering that he is still, he's, even with probably having, Recovery Girl help him and all the other medical advancements that they have with quirks and everything, he's still not able to walk. He's still paralyzed from the waist down. We do see Native here, because Native is the one that is being attacked when Izuku shows up. And, that's one that Stain's trying to kill at that point in time. And Izuku and the others are able to prevent Native from dying at this point. We'll get back to Native. But, so he's on the list of the injured, but he's not beyond repair. He's not beyond recovery. And thankfully, neither were Izuku or Shoto or Ida. They were all okay. I mean, Ida got his arm hurt, but he's doing better with it, so that's good. Then we move on to the next very major death that happens in the series, and this is actually kind of the first major death that happens in My Hero, and it of course is Sir Night-Eye, Mirai Sakaki. And he's Sir Night-Eye. He's a former sidekick to All Might, one of the two sidekicks that All Might has had. His quirk is foresight, which we know allows him to see another person's future. I don't remember if it stated if he can use it on himself, but he doesn't usually like to use it on himself. He uses it on other people. We see him use it on Izuku, and we see him use it on the henchman that works for the Hasaikai for the Yakuza, and he's able to use that to help find where Eri is. And he's used it on All Might before to try to find All Might's future and everything. And he didn't like what he saw, but he that's why he tried to find Mirio, so that way All Might could give the quirk to Mirio. We now know that would have been a terrible thing to do. Night-Eye didn't know that at the time, and now thankfully Mirio has his quirk back, although there is the question of if Izuku had given Mirio One for All after he lost his quirk, after he lost permeation because of what happened with Eri and her quirk and the quirk erasing drug. There is the question of, would it have been too much for him then? I mean, if Eri had used her quirk on him and rewound him, then that would probably erase all for One for All altogether, which is not a good thing, but it would give him back permeation. But that's a different theory video. That might be a different theory video, but we'll see what happens. We'll see, but we'll move on to what happens with Night-Eye. We know that he uses his quirk foresight to find out where Eri is, for where the Hasaikai are. She can see Hasaikai is, where Overhaul is and everything, and to find Eri so that way they can get to Eri and save her. And he uses his quirk to fight against Overhaul. He also uses these very high density seals because he likes, he stamps stuff and everything all over the place. And he uses these very high density seals so they're 5 kilograms each, which is about 11 pounds, which I'm like, okay, so, I mean, they're very small, but they're very dense. So it's not, it's not like the same measure as like getting hit with a bullet, but it's still gonna freaking hurt if they hit you. And they're still gonna do damage to things around you if they hit you or if they don't hit you. So, he seems to be rather good at hand-to-hand combat to a degree. And we know that he's very fast and agile, which is a very good thing to have when you're trying to dodge attacks. And he uses that when he's fighting Overhaul. Unfortunately, when he's fighting Overhaul, at one point he does get, because Overhaul's, overhauling everything. He's moving everything around and rearranging everything and, making the spikes come out of the floor and everything, because whatever he touches, he can rearrange within a certain amount of area of him, I'm assuming. And he, makes all these different spikes come out. And, he already fought Mirio, unfortunately, to try to get Eri back. And at one point we know that Sir Night-Eye takes one of the spikes, goes through his arm, and then another one we know, comes, through his stomach, which is not good. And he's very badly injured in that, and that's when Izuku shows up and he fights Overhaul with Eri helping him, and that's how they take down Overhaul. And then we get to, Night-Eye ends up getting to kind of watch this a bit because, Suyu's holding on to him and everything because she's trying to keep him safe, and he kind of gets to watch the end of the battle. But then what ends up happening is when they're in the hospital, because they all go to the hospital after this, because they all need medical attention. They need a lot of medical attention. Specifically, Night-Eye needs medical attention. And, he's hooked up with all these tubes and wires, and he's got, like, the oxygen mask and all the tubes and everything coming out of his chest. which is not a fun sight. But, All Might shows up and Izuku is there, and it's the first time that Night Eye and All Might have seen each other. And, Mirio gets to say goodbye to Sir Night Eye. And, we know that Sir Night Eye had told Izuku that he knows about All for One, or he knows about One for All and All for One and All Might's power and everything, and that All Might is dying, or well, not dying, but that he's losing his power and everything, because this is, of course, after what happens with, the huge battle between All Might and All for One. But we know that Night Eye wanted Izuku to give Mirio the quirk. And I think Night Eye did find out that Mirio had his quirk taken away, or I think he saw what happened with Eri when Mirio had his quirk taken from him. And, he knows that he doesn't have one at this point in time, but he still uses his power before he dies to try to look at Mirio's future. And he uses that to try to look as far into Mirio's future as he can, and he does, he can see great detail and everything. And he does smile at the end of it when he says goodbye to Mirio. And I think that, we know now that Mirio now has his quirk back because Eri was able to master her quirk enough that she could rewind Mirio to the point where he does still have his quirk, and then he can keep, move forward, and he has his quirk now, and which is a very good thing to happen. And I think that it's supposed to be that Sir Night Eye saw that. He saw that was going to happen. He saw that Eri was going to get good enough with her quirk that she would be able to do that for Mirio so he can go back to being a hero. And it's not like Mirio ever 100% stopped being a hero. We're pretty sure that he still kept physically in shape and everything, and he was there with Eri trying to keep her happy, and he was helping her and everything with, him and Izawa were helping Eri start adjusting to the real world, and with taking her to the festival and everything so she can start, slowly getting better. And which is very good for Eri, and it meant that Mirio didn't 100% stop being a hero. He just unfortunately didn't have his quirk anymore. And that's one of the things that I think that Horikoshi is trying to show with the series is Izuku was quirkless, and now he has a quirk which allows him to do all of these things. And Mirio had this quirk that he was using to do so much, with being a sidekick and training to be a hero, and was probably, could end up being one of the top 10 heroes now that he has his quirk back. With his personality is so similar to All Might, and smiling, and how much he wants to save people, the Lemillion, he wants to save 1 million people and such. But even when, and Izuku sees this, it's even when he doesn't have his quirk anymore for that time frame, for however many months that is, he's still not giving up on what he wanted to do. He still keeps, he physically recovers, and then he still physically keeps in shape. He probably still does whatever training that he can with, Majiki and Nejire and everything, so that way he's not, losing his skill that he has already. He just needs to get his quirk back. And he does get his quirk back, and Night Eye saw this. Looping back around the Night Eye, he saw that this was going to happen with Mirio. And I don't know if Night Eye, when he died, if he fully understood the fact that Izuku is the one that can do the most with One for All, because he's quirkless like All Might could, and with what All Might could do, now Izuku can do even more. And, we don't know 100% if, because he didn't look into Izuku's future. He looked into Mirio's future specifically, but not Izuku's. He may have gotten a glimpse of Izuku's future with what happens with Mirio, but we don't know that. But we know that, Night Eye always liked it when people laughed, when they smiled, when they laughed, when they were happy, because that was very important. Because if all the heroes are saving everything, but there's nothing to smile or laugh about, then what's the point of the heroes saving everybody? And, he never met Nana. We know this. She was gone long before him, before Night Eye and, All Might became a team. But that sounds something that Nana would very much agree with. And, and All Might seems to agree with that as well. And, thankfully him and Night Eye were able to reconcile before Night Eye died. which was a very, very good thing. And and that's kind of where Night Eye's story ends at the moment. We may end up getting a flashback sequence at some point where maybe we'll get a flashback with Mirio back to when he was still an intern at Night Eye's agency, or maybe a flashback with All Might where he sees that, but I don't know. We'll see what ends up happening with this final arc that we're going into for My Hero. That'd be kind of fun though if we got some of that, but we'll see what ends up happening. I'm not going to be surprised at all if Night Eye gets referenced again at some point in the story though. And then from there we move on to the other hero that died unfortunately during the hideout raid, the Yakuza arc, whatever you want to call it, which was Senjin Higawara, who is the sand hero Snatch, whose quirk is Sandstorm. So kind of think Crocodile from One Piece. He can manipulate sand, and he can turn parts of his body into sand. He is tasked with guarding Overhaul on their, when Overhaul is being transported to where he's going to be in prison after he's, defeated by Izuku. And unfortunately, that caravan is attacked by the League of Villains. It's attacked by Dabi and Compress and everything, and Shigaraki specifically. And unfortunately, Sandstorm is Snatch is able to stand up to Dabi a little bit. I mean, with the way that his sand works, he can't be affected by Shigaraki's quirk because he can already disintegrate, so he's not affected by, decay. And he's a fairly good match with Dabi to a degree, in the fact that, his sand is a lot harder for Dabi to burn, because he could just, whirl a sandstorm and prevent the stuff from, burning. Unfortunately, that does kind of end up being his downfall, in the fact that he can only transform parts of his body into sand. And what happened is Dabi used his fire, his hellfire, cremation fire, whatever you want to call it at this point in time, souped up Endeavor fire, used that to kind of, I think it was, since he can only turn certain parts of his body into sand, he surrounded him with it to the point where I think it just made him suffocate. I don't remember exactly, but Dabi used his fire to surround Snatch to the point where, even if parts of him were sand, there were other parts of him that weren't, and those parts took the damage, and that was how Sand died during the, Shikasi Hasaikai arc, the Hideout Raid arc, the Yakuza arc, whatever you want to call it. The instant aftermath of that is that they're able to get, Overhaul out of the van that he's being carried, or that he's being transported in. And basically what ends up happening is, Toya Toya, well, no, not Toya, well, kind of Toya, but what ends up happening is, of course, Shigaraki disintegrates Overhaul's hands, which is, that's where Overhaul's quirk is in his hands. And because, Shigaraki did not like what Overhaul had done, he killed Mag, and he, kind of tried to one-up, the League of Villains, which, we know that Tomura does not like being one-upped, doesn't like it when Izuku didn't, when Izuku's been able to do it, didn't like it when All Might was able to do it, he just, he doesn't like it when that happens. And, he takes some of that out on, Overhaul, where he disintegrates his hands while they're in, the cuff thing, so that way he can't use his quirk. There's not really too much else that is the aftermath of Snatch dying. Mostly just because we don't know that much about him. We know his quirk, we know his name, we know that he's a pro hero, and we know how he died. That was about it. We didn't really learn anything else about him. He's mentioned by Endeavor to Dabi at one point, and Dabi doesn't even remember him. So, it's not good, but it's, that's about all that we get from that. Then we move on to the long list of the dead, unfortunately, that has come out of the most recent arc that just finished up. And we're just kind of going to go through some of these. We're going to do some of the more minor ones, and then we'll do definitely the major ones that came out of what happened. The one big major one that came out of the Paranormal Liberation Army arc. That fight. Oh god. So one of the ones that was killed he was actually killed in the breakouts at Tartarus. He was a guard at Tartarus. His name is I'm probably gonna pronounce this Briarios. He looks to be a hero that has a lot of different arms and hands. It's kind of what he looked like. I don't know too much else about him. They don't say anything else about him. One of the other ones that died was a hero whose real name is Enma Kanagi. I'm probably mispronouncing some of these names, and I apologize. But he was the magic hero Majestic. We don't really know that much about him. His quirk is called Magic. It allowed him to create platforms out of ring-shaped energy from his wrists that he could use to levitate himself and others. I don't know what ranking he had in the hero rankings. It didn't look like he had a ranking from what was listed when I was looking things up, but I might have missed that. He was killed. I don't remember if they stated exactly how he was killed, but he was one of the ones that died during the arc. The only little bit that we know about him is that Momo and Setsuma, who is Lizardy from class 1B, they interned at his agency during, when everybody else was interning at all the other agencies and everything, during the Endeavor agency arc where Izuku and Shoto and Bakugo were all at, the Endeavor agency. Momo and Setsuna were at his agency. So we kind of go with those two having to work together. It would have been okay if Kendo was there too, but they wanted to, I guess, have Momo have to work with someone else from, class 1B as well, which is fine. Don't really know too much else about Majestic. Got a good name though, I guess. And if you're a One Piece fan, Enma is also the name of one of Zoro's swords right now that used to belong to Kazuki Oden, but that's not really affected by this at all. Then we move on to one of the other ones that was on the list of the dead from this arc. There was a bunch of miscellaneous ones that we don't really get names for. But the next one that we do get a name for is Native, who was the one that we met way back in the, the hero, Stain Killer, Stain Hero Killer arc. And we are introduced, Native dies during this, the Paranormal Liberation arc. And he's killed by a Nomu. He's attacked by one of them. I don't think we ever got a whole answer as to what Native's quirk was. He seems to be themed after Native Americans, though, quite obviously, given his name and given his outfit. But that's about all that we get for him. So we met him back during the Hero Killer Stain arc, and then now we watch him die, unfortunately, during this arc. We don't really know too much else about him. That's what we get for him. The next one that we have is the eye gun hero Exless, whose quirk is Laser. He can fire energy beams from his right eye. He's first introduced in the Hideout Raid arc. So he's, I think he's, no, so it's not the Hideout Raid arc. No, yeah, it's the Hideout Raid arc where he's introduced. He is there. He's one of the ones that's there to try to save Bakugo from the League of Villains. I think is where he's first introduced. That was his quirk, is he just, he can shoot lasers out of his right eye. So think Superman if he has to wear an eye patch. I guess. We don't really know too much else about him. He was killed by Tomura, so he's killed by Shigaraki specifically. From what I read, when I was double checking through some of this, he ended up being able to, even though he died, he was still able to destroy a bunch of the things, the machines that were producing a lot of the quirk erasing drug. And I think also the quirk heightening drug. So he was able to destroy those, so those are kind of now unable to be reproduced, which is a good thing, because less of that is a lot less stuff that the heroes have to worry about. it's just less, less likely of someone losing their quirk or a villain overusing a quirk, or overpowering themselves with the quirk. That's how he died. He was killed by Tomura, so I think he was just disintegrated by Tomura. I don't remember if he was one of the heroes that found Tomura when he first, woke up out of his, weird coma in a tube while he was supposed to be there for a while longer. That's all that we know about Exless. Then we move on to the highest ranking hero so far in the series to actually die, which was Shield hero Crust. We are introduced to him at the billboard things where they're doing the top rankings when now Endeavor is number 1 and Hawks is number 2 and Best Genius is number 3 and all that stuff. We're introduced to Crust, who is the number 6 hero. He that's about all that we get there. He seems to be very sincere hero to a degree. His quirk is just called Shield. He allows him to grow stone-like hexagon-shaped shields from his body. So I guess give Captain America more shields, and he can fight like Crust, and they can get bigger. He uses the ability to protect himself and others, which is a very good thing. He can expand them to a large size and different directions and such like that. So he can probably do like a force field around himself, and he can use it to protect others and everything, which is a very good thing for him to be able to do. The edges of his shield can cut through obstacles, as what it says here, and as an offensive attack, he can pierce. Use it to he can use the pieces, and pieces of it can be detached and thrown at the same for the same purpose. So it's very sharp on the edges, and you can use that to slice something if need be, which can be very good if you're trying to rescue someone if they're underneath rubble, or depending on what kind of attack is flying at you. If protecting isn't going to be a very good one, you can use it to slice the attack, which is a good thing to do. And he can also, as I said, he can detach pieces of it and throw them, so that's helpful too. We don't really, I think during the Paranormal Liberation work, we do get a little bit more of how he fights. We don't see him fight at all before then, but he was the highest ranking hero to die during that time frame. And, so he's unfortunately gone. That's another one out of the top 10 heroes that is, no longer there. One of the other guys retired, and then, Endeavor and Hawks are having this whole issue. And yeah, Best Genius is back, but I don't quite think he's going to be able to be a super big influence on being a hero for a while. So we'll see what happens with that. Then we move on to the one that is more the one that gets you more, for the heroes that we lost. Here are some of the other heroes that unfortunately we lost. Obviously, I'm still trying to learn copyright, so I'm not 100% sure how big these images can be, but hopefully you can see some of them, or you can go and look up the list of the dead, unfortunately, from the ARC, which is not a fun list. But of course, at the top of the list, we have Midnight. Midnight. Nemuri Kayama is her real name. The R-rated hero Midnight. She is the modern hero art history teacher at UA. Was the modern hero art history teacher at UA. Her quirk, I cannot pronounce it, but I will attempt, is Somna Butlist. Probably just butchered that. It allows her to create a type of aroma from her own body that allows her to make people fall asleep. It does seem to work better on men than women, but I'm pretty sure that if you're a lesbian and you're attracted to Midnight, then it'll probably affect you more as well. Although by that right, if you're a gay man, it's probably not going to affect you as much. We know that she fights, she has melee and support, melee combat skills, and she has support combat, so she's very good at being kind of a support hero, and the fact that she can, take out large groups of people with her, her quirk. And she uses whips and fans. She very much likes using whips. She has a very sadistic nature. And she has her ultra thin fabric suit that she uses, that allows her to rip the fabric and release a large amount of her, aroma, pheromone, whatever you want to call it, that allows her to affect a large amount of people at times, which is probably one of the reasons why she was one of the referees during the matches during the UA Sports Festival arc. Because if one of the contestants gets a little overzealous at everything, like what happened with Bakugo, she can rip her outfit and knock them out. She's there through a fair amount of UA of the series so far. She's had a bit of an issue thus far when it comes to Mount Lady, unfortunately, because the two of them don't always see eye to eye, but they seem to be doing they seem to have been doing a bit better on that, unfortunately. We know that Midnight died while she was trying to, help the children or help the students stop Gigantomachia. And she unfortunately did not make it out, and this is revealed to us in the fact that we see a panel where we see a bunch of the kids crying. We see a crumpled mask that is very obviously Midnight's mask, and we see Midnight's arm and wrist and her cuff on her wrist that she wears for part of her costume. And and the kids are just crying, and because she was their teacher. She's like Izuku and Ochako and Sue watched, they saw Sir Night-Eye die, and Izuku, it's like when you're training to be a hero, that there are other heroes that have died. Izuku knows that the rest of the people that have had his quirk are dead now, except for All Might, because he's still alive at the moment, but he could have died, and Bakugo could have been killed by the League of Villains, and Izuku and his friends that went, and the others that went to go and save Bakugo could have been easily killed by the League of Villains. The students that were all at, the training camp when, the Vanguard unit from the League of Villains attacked, they could have all died, between Mustard's gas, and, Moonfish and all the others that were there, and Muscular. They could have all very easily been killed or very badly injured to the point where they can't move forward in their hero careers. Same thing with, Izuku, Shoto, and Ida against, Stain. It's that a lot of them could have died at this point in time if it wasn't for luck to a degree. Yes, skill comes into it, but luck to a degree. But Midnight is the first one that they see that they've had this huge amount of bond with that they lose. And I wouldn't be surprised if we get some flashbacks, from what happens between when Izuku left to go be on his own, and then when we're catching up with the students at this point in time, in that now that everything's caught up, if we get some flashbacks where we have some conversations between the students and the teachers, or the students themselves or the students and their parents for all intents and purposes, about about whether or not this is something that they want to keep doing. Because some of the parents were the parents of class 1A and class 1B, when Izawa and King Vlad and All Might went to have to go and talk to the different parents and everything, some of them are still okay with their kids wanting to be heroes, but we have specifically Inko, where she's like, she's basically saying, I don't want to have to watch my son get hurt anymore, or worse. And you don't blame parents for acting that way, even if if your kid wants to be a hero, even in this world of heroes. There's always that chance that there's going to be some battle that your son or daughter goes off to and doesn't come home. That's something that is very, very obvious in the world of heroes. We see this in Avengers and, in other Marvel things. We see this in DC. We see this in other anime. I mean, in Sailor Moon and of itself, several of the, Sailor Pluto dies at one point, and technically Sailor Saturn dies at some point. We see this, in a lot of different shows where it's people that purposely put themselves in danger to protect others. They die. We see this when it comes to firefighters and police officers and, people in the military. And in, My Hero Academia, that's a very good way of showing that these people that train to be heroes put themselves at risk to protect you, to protect your city, to protect your family, to protect your country, all that stuff. And yeah, they're being, the kids are being trained to be heroes so this doesn't happen to them. But as we see with Oboro, even in training, even when you're still a student, that can still happen to you. And there's always the ones that are left behind. And that's part of the effect of what happens when someone dies in those cases. It's, Midnight dies, her students are still there, and they're still going to remember her. The rest of the staff and any of the other heroes that she's fought with over the years, like, cause she was in Vigilantes for a while, so Crawler and Pop Step, and they're going to remember her and everything. But then in this, her students are the ones that they're the ones that kind of have to get this into their head that can happen again. That can happen to someone who may not have been a teacher. That can happen to one of your friends. That could happen to you. And I think that that's a good thing that Horikoshi is kind of trying to point out in this. Because it reminds the students and the readers, too, that, Izuku may not necessarily die throughout the course of the story. Bakugo may not die yet. Shoto may not die. 1A and, 1A now, 2A might be a little bit more protected from this in the fact that, none of them may die, but other heroes around them can die. That's where the Midnight thing comes in. And even, top heroes can still die. Best Jeanist almost died. Hawks almost died. Endeavor almost died. There's that whole thing there that happened. Shoto got very badly injured. Bakugo took, whatever the quirks that Tomura had, whatever through the chest and everything, and he's kind of okay, but, now his kind of the closest thing that he has to a best friend is kind of gone and went off to go do stuff, so now we have to find out what's happening with, the rest of Class 1A. And 2A, whatever you want to call them at this point in time in the time frame of the manga. But I'm sure that that's a conversation that probably a lot of the students had with each other, with their parents, with Izawa, with the rest of the teachers. I'm sure that that's a conversation that the was Hound Dog or whatever his name is. It's the guidance counselor. I still never understand why he's the guidance counselor, but hey, if that's what he wanted to be, that's what he wanted to be. But, I'm sure that that's a talk that he never wants to have with a student. But unfortunately, in the field of work that he's in, it's a talk that he's had to have had with students and parents. I mean, we see what, Oboro's death did to Izawa, but he stayed a hero, and now he's the teacher at UA, and now he just lost another one of his closest and oldest friends, and with losing Midnight. We don't know exactly what that's going to do to Izawa or even Present Mike in that same situation, because the four of them were all very close, and All Might and Present Mike and Izawa still seem very close to this day. And now it's just the two of them. And, regardless of whether you want to say if they're a couple or they were in love with Midnight or blah, 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 blah. Just in regard of what we see in the series, the two of them do get along. Izawa gets annoyed to no end by Present Mike, but he's still his friend, and he's probably still his best friend. And now that's going to be the ramification of all these heroes that have died throughout the course of the series. They have affected the other characters. The villain deaths have affected the others too. I might do a separate video about the villains that have died throughout My Hero Academia, which is not as many, but I might do a separate video about that as a companion piece to this video. We'll see. But, we see what happens with when the heroes die. There's the ramifications to the other people around them, their families, their friends, their co-workers, the people that they saved. And, Midnight and Crust and Majestic and Native may not be able to get as much of the memorial that they deserve because of everything else in the world of My Hero Academia at this point in time is kind of going, down the tube. And, that's not a good thing to deal with. But, they all have ramifications in that. And that's basically where I'm going to end the video, because I've said what I wanted to say. I talked about the ones that they've lost throughout the course of My Hero. I'm pretty sure that at some point in the future, depending on how much longer the arc or how much longer the series runs, I may do another video about the other heroes that they've lost. And as I said, I might do a companion piece to this about the different villains that we've seen die. There haven't been as many, but there's been a couple. And those deaths still can be, to a degree, impactful. So we'll see what happens with that. But that's what I got for the end of this video. I thank you for watching. I hope that you enjoyed the video, and I hope that you have a nice rest of your day. Bye. This is the only future that we shouldn't change. So please, keep smiling. Society needs smiles, laughs, and energy to bring about a brighter future.